Let's talk about the college football playoff. Let's talk about the flaws of it and how Georgia really could have been screwed if it didn't win in overtime in the SEC championship on Saturday against Texas to go on and earn a bye in the first expanded playoffs, the first 12-team playoff. We used to have it at 4. Now we've got it at 12, and it's still flawed. And I want to discuss it, and I want everybody who isn't aware of it, if you're already aware, thank you. Watch along. Maybe you'll learn something new. If not, I want you to learn something new. And I want to talk about the bracket, and I want to talk about the problems with the best way for me to do that is to pull it up. So here it is right here, right? You got Clemson versus Texas, Tennessee, Ohio State. I don't like the way that they did this one. I should have brought up a different bracket, but we'll work with me here. Work with me here. So Texas got Clemson, right? Because they lost to Georgia. And what the committee did was not move the losers of the conference championship games from their spots, right? So Texas isn't really ranked number 5 in the country. They're actually ranked number 3. And so here's my thing with that. Georgia was ranked number 5 heading into the SEC championship, correct? They would have been ranked number 7 if the playoff ended that day. If Texas was the SEC champion and they had the bye. Georgia would have been ranked 7 because of where it was ranked. Unless they chose to manipulate the rankings, and I'll get to that in just a second. But if Georgia would have been ranked 2nd or 7th and Oregon still won the Big Ten championship, obviously Texas is the winner of the SEC championship in this scenario, Texas would have been ranked number 2. Well, the games are set up to where certain seeds are going to play certain teams. So the 8-9 matchup in the first round would play the number 1, right? So that's where you're getting Ohio State and Tennessee. Oregon is getting screwed over in that it's going to have to play Ohio State if Ohio State beats Tennessee. And if not, it's going to have to play a really good Tennessee team, right? And all these teams are good. There's levels to it, but all these teams are good. So follow along with me. The number 2 team would play the 7 and the 10 winner. Well, in this case, it would have been Georgia and Indiana to go on to play Texas in the Sugar Bowl. So what you would get in that scenario, just, working with my hypothetical and assuming that Indiana would lose to Georgia, Georgia would go on and play Texas in the Sugar Bowl. Now, I know that a couple weeks ago I came on here, or not even a couple weeks ago, but I came on here with Dean and I said, don't worry about this too much. I don't think it's going to happen. Don't go slamming your fists on desks. But because Oregon got screwed over here with the matchup, I think that it's time to shed light into all the flaws of this thing. And there are multiple. There shouldn't be auto buys for these conferences. And we shouldn't be breaking this just off of wins and losses. I know that it's just, I don't think that people view Indiana as a top 12 team. I think that 11-1 and winning all those games really matters. And I don't know that Indiana is one of the best 12 teams. I was kind of in the boat that they should be in there, but that's a whole flaw in itself, right? And that's why Arizona State and Boise State are in this playoff and get buys. Arizona State wouldn't have made the college football playoff if it wasn't for this auto bid situation. Clemson, the ACC champion, wouldn't make the college football playoff if it wasn't for the fact that the top 5 ranked conference champions get in. That's a little bit different. I think conference champions should get into this thing, and that kind of goes back to the way that March Madness works. But when you think about Arizona State and they're ranked not in the top 12 in the actual ranking, but they've got a number 4 seed and a bye. They get to take a whole month off almost. It just doesn't add up. And so Georgia, looking back at this bracket, would have potentially been screwed if it was actually the number 7 seed, like it would have been if Texas were to have beaten Georgia in the SEC championship. And Texas would be in this number 2 spot because of Oregon being number 1. And what are we getting out of that? Georgia played Texas in October, went out there and played in Austin. We saw how that went. and then you saw a rematch in the SEC Championship. What would playing a third time? I mean, I guess that some people would have really enjoyed that matchup, and yes, it'd be good football, and it'd be a cool matchup between Texas and Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, which is something that they did back in 2018 season. I think it was actually New Year's Day in 2019, but that's technicality. But what are we gaining out of that? You're just punishing these two schools playing each other, and we're just seeing the same matchups over and over. You could avoid this, right? But then you get to all of it, right? Penn State, here's another example. Penn State is the loser of the Big Ten championship game, and it didn't get punished. It ends up being number 6 in these college football playoff rankings, not the actual rankings, but the way that they're seeding it for the playoff. Oregon won, and what does it get? It gets the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee, a team that Oregon struggled to beat by 1 point, and a very good SEC football team that I think is actually better than Ohio State, but this matchup's being played in Columbus, so I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. Instead, Penn State gets to play SMU, who just got beat by Clemson, okay? Who would not be in this thing if it wasn't for winning the ACC championship. That's not the team that wasn't sniffing the top 12. So Penn State gets a home matchup against SMU. Obviously, it's an extra game, and they don't get a bye, but they get this home matchup, and then who do they get to play? They get to play Boise State. People are going to say, well, it was a close game between Oregon and Boise State. I don't want to hear it. I will eat my words and come on here and talk about it with you guys if Boise State ends up beating Penn State, which I just, or SMU, but I just don't see it happening that way. And Penn State avoids Texas, they avoid Tennessee, Ohio State, Oregon, all these teams. The biggest challenge for Penn State down here would probably be Georgia, and that wouldn't happen until you get to the Orange Bowl. I'm not exactly sure if this is how it works with the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, but they're making it seem that way at least. And I just, it's one of the flaws. It's one of the flaws. I'm kind of going over a handful of them here with you guys, but I think that Georgia really somehow, some way, after everything that's happened to Georgia this season, after going to Alabama and losing in the way that it did, just dealing with excuse me for cursing, bullshit this season. A lot of bullshit, right? When you talk about what happened I'm not talking about, they should have lost at Ole Miss. That's not what I mean. But with the field rushing, the trash throwing at Texas, an 8 overtime game with Georgia Tech, going to Kentucky, and it just has been a crazy season, and BS is a good way to put some of it. And after all that, Georgia actually got rewarded, right? They got rewarded for this big season, but not because the committee was trying to reward it, and that's what people need to realize. There are people out there that think, oh, well, this is Georgia's gift for what it had to go through the season. No, Georgia is benefiting, and I think that it can beat Notre Dame and Indiana, and I don't know if those are going to be as tough of outs as some of the other teams towards the top of that bracket. But it is a microcosm of the flaws of this college football playoff. It's contracted to be this way next season, and it just can't be, because this is stupid. I mean, this is actually stupid. There's no world where Arizona State deserves this bye week over literally almost any of the teams that it's ahead of. I'm almost at a loss for words when I think about it. I mean, Arizona State, good football team, good running back. I think that the coach brings a lot of excitement. I think that there's good things going on down there. And it's great that they won the Big 12, but earning a bye, I mean, they're not a top 12 team. They get thwarted into the rankings because of this dumb structure that got agreed upon. And the only reason that this was agreed upon was because it was one of the only ways that the Big Ten and the SEC could get the other conferences to agree on it. So this has to end. And it has to, because, and if these are the rankings, I don't know if this is how I'd rank the top 4, but the top 4 according to the college football playoff is Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. They're more worthy, Texas and Penn State, of those byes, I would argue, over Arizona State and Boise State. It's the way I see it. I think it's the way that a lot of people see it. And Georgia somehow, some way, after everything that happened, ended up getting the path that on paper looks like it's an easier path, right? Now, I'm going to dive into what the matchup would look like with Notre Dame and what the matchup would look like with Indiana here over the coming week and talk about what does Georgia's offense look like with Gunnar Stockton, because it looks more and more like it's going to be Gunnar Stockton out there during these college football playoffs. So there's a lot to talk about. Georgia, it's been a hell of a season, and I think that it got a good deal when it comes to this playoff. It's not going to be easy, and it's definitely not going to be easy without its starting quarterback. But I had to rant. I had to get it out there, and I had to kind of admit, hey, I thought that these weren't huge issues. Well, they actually are. All right, thank you for watching.